Everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're doing another rookie review, this time talking about Jaime Jaquez, who broke out for the Heat as an older rookie. And I'm going to take this opportunity to dunk on myself. My dumbass was like, this pick sucks. But even I acknowledge that I'm probably going to look dumb for it because it's the Miami Heat, and the Heat always do the right thing for some reason. But hey, I got these other grades surrounding the Jaime pick, I'd say pretty correct so far. But anyways, Jaime instantly came in as an older rookie and contributed for the Heat. But the question for these guys, of course, there's the whole like Heat role player thing, but how much can older rookies grow? You know, you have guys like Desmond Bane and Jalen Brunson and Derek White and Mikal Bridges who come in older and keep getting a lot better, but those guys are the exceptions, usually not the rule. So let's go over Jaime Jaquez and figure out what his ceiling looks like, or at least try our best to. Like, subscribe, comment, all of that would be fantastic. And my favorite trait of Jaime's is definitely his playmaking. As a legit 6'6", 6'7" wing, he's developing into the one of the better wing passers in the league already, I'd say, where he can hold two defenders, find a pass, find a cutter down low. Not a super dynamic, like, advantage creator, manipulator type, but as a complementary playmaker, he is incredibly quick processing the floor. He's great passing from the post. And, of course, Miami is the team that would empower Jaime to play like he did in college, to play out of the post, to play out of the high post, to run some pick and rolls. Like, the Heat are so good to me at putting their players in positions to succeed, even if, like, traditional quote-unquote logic doesn't really support, like, oh, this, questionable shooting wing who did a lot of post-ups, probably not going to translate. Let's just let him do what he did well in the NBA, and lo and behold, it worked. And you can really see his smarts and processing and decision-making chops. I talk about decision-making all the time, and I think Jaime is one of the premier examples of that being a success story for prospects, which is funny because I faded Jaime. I'm dumb for that, I acknowledge. OG digs are absolutely vicious, as I've talked about in my defense series, but Jaime perfectly times this kick out to hero. A lot of the stuff Jaime does as a playmaker isn't absurdly flashy, but it is very effective and on time and in rhythm, and I think that says a lot about who he is and the kind of plays he can make. Like, he's not really cooking anyone off the dribble, but has enough of a handle to hold this spin move, wait for the help to vacate, and then kick to the corner, right? He's not inventing any crazy passing reads, but he's reacting to the defense, he's punishing help, and yeah, you can do some basic, like, secondary pick and roll stuff. You don't want Jaime Jaquez necessarily running your offense, but Jaime can absolutely function as a legit pick and roll ball handler, especially like secondary, empty side stuff like this, where very easy gonna read this. Nick Richards helps way too, or is very high at the level. Brandon Miller is clearing out to Duncan Robinson. And of course, having an offensive system like Miami's at times and players like Duncan Robinson clearing out so Brandon Miller can't attach here is going to help. Like, I don't think Jaime is routinely hitting crazy, difficult, tight window passes, but for a wing, I think he's an incredibly good passer, especially given that he was a rookie, and that even though he is an older rookie, I would expect that Jaquez is going to improve as a playmaker. Such a great off-ball player, and I love how decisive Jaime is. He's never wasting motion. A lot of rookies in situations like this they'll dilly-dally, they'll hang around, as we've seen in a lot of other of the rookie recap videos. But nope, Jaime immediately makes a decision, smart pass to Bam, little floater. He doesn't stop the flow of offense, which is so valuable. And Jaime, despite not being a dynamic creator, can really score in the intermediate and at the rim. And we saw moments throughout the season where Jaquez had 20, 30-point games when the Heat needed him to carry their offense. And yeah, you don't want Jaime doing it all the time, but the fact that Jaime can create jumpers in the mid-range with his great craft and timing and patience, and of course the height, like this Kings game, he was doing it a good amount. I'm making a bump and use his crazy touch. I do worry about his lack of separation. He's not an incredibly like potent or efficient offensive scorer or creator, as we'll get to. And he can hit these crazy shots because he has really great touch and he's tall, but I don't love that Jaime has to rely on this as much as he does. That's a tough life to live for any player, especially one who's not like a nuclear explosive athlete. I think Jaime is a good athlete for sure, but is not a crazy one. I love seeing Jaime win with his spin move, as Jaquez is going to do a great job setting up this screen, spin back on Bruce Brown, decelerate, kind of wall off Miles Turner with his shoulder. Look at his left arm as well, kind of moving Miles Turner's hand away so he can shield and finish there. This kind of craft stuff oftentimes doesn't translate from college to the NBA, but in Jaime's case, it absolutely did. And I think in part that's just because of the legit size and athleticism he does have. Like, really good job here, pass faking here, shaking Jarrett Allen out of his shoes and just floating that little shot. And he has really excellent touch. He's always had great touch, even before he could be like an on-ball initiator. And the fact that I think Jaime went through a lot of different roles in college. He was a role player as a freshman, developed into a legit star, and was always really impactful. Like I said, this spin move is great. Jaime does have to work pretty hard to get his buckets, which isn't ideal, like I said, as a creator. But he can do it against another former older rookie who didn't end up sustaining his early year production, Chris Duarte. Beautiful behind the back, counter with the spin move, scoop layup. It's not a creation diet that I think is sustainable for like your primary offensive engine, but that's not Jaime's role, and that's not what the Heat are asking him to do, and I don't imagine they'll ever really ask him to do that. Jaime is an insanely good foul drawer, and we can see some of the second jump popping up here. Jaime is a really nice vertical athlete. Like he's been in dunk contests. I think he won like high school or college dunk contests. He's a really, really good vertical athlete. He's not the most like explosive horizontally or flexible guy, which we'll get into, but he can definitely get up. And it's just really nice to have your 20th overall pick rookie be able to isolate against Jaylen Brown in the playoffs. Jaime definitely struggled in the playoffs on offense, but you see moments and flashes like this where he can create late shot clock buckets. That's just a very valuable skill for your like complementary off-ball wing guy to have. Like, you don't want Jaime doing that all the time, but the fact that he can do it sometimes is really, really nice, and I think a good signal for his upside. Once again, we see a great spin move as Jaime beautifully navigates these defenders, gets to the front side of the rim. Really crafty, really excellent footwork, and that's a viable path for him to win against real NBA defenders. It's not a ton of separation again, but he's really good at getting leverage against a good defender in Sam Hauser. He's actually not the greatest at getting leverage. I kind of misspoke because of some of the flexibility issues, but he ends up doing it here against a guy who can be pretty upright playing defense in Sam Hauser, and he ends up scoring in the post there. And Jaquez has a little bit of straight line speed, like especially when he has a screen, he can get around Corey Kispert here, explode to the rim, and finish through some light traffic. He does a lot of stuff at a competent enough level. He's really is, as I referenced in the thumbnail, a jack of all trades in some way and a master of none, where Jaime is such a solid. I think passing maybe is a little better than just jack of all trades, but handling and scoring in the intermediate and scoring in the mid-range is all of this really good stuff that he does. And I like this play, even though Jaime can't finish over Nick Claxton. That's, it's Nick Claxton, whatever. But Jaime is so patient picking out his spots as a driver. And if there's one really big problem, I think the shot is still quite concerning. Look how the Nets are playing him. Defense is sagged off of him all the time. But instead of panicking like a lot of non-shooters do, Jaime waits, finds his gap, and then explodes and gets up for the near finish right there. It really is running back-esque in terms of his vision as a driver. And Jaime can just too small some guys. Ayo Dosunmu is not a bad defensive player, but he's not 6'7", and he doesn't have the frame to counter Jaime like that. And I really do appreciate a guy like Jaime who has the frame and is willing to use it to his advantage. And another great example of that here, just skying this shot over Shea. I don't love the process here because of how difficult of a shot it is, and again, hard to sustain on plays like this, but in a pinch, having a guy like Jaquez who can shoot a beautiful bank shot floater over Shea, some of the shot making touch is really impressive, and hey, maybe he can keep developing as a tough shot maker, and that can be one of his paths to potential future stardom. But there are a lot of creation issues, as I mentioned, the flexibility and the burst. He just doesn't get very low here. He's trying to kind of go right through Zach LaVine, but loses his handle. Jaime's handle is pretty good for his size, but it's not perfect by any means. As you can see how upright he's playing, right? I've talked so many times about low lowering the shoulder and lowering your torso to be as parallel with the ground as possible to generate leverage and force. But Jaime is just not great at that, which is why I think he has to resort to footwork and touch and craft to score a lot of the times, which works. But in the end, like in playoff series against great defenders like Cade Cunningham, is he going to have the juice to really create consistent advantages? And especially when Cade doesn't really have to close out super hard, because Jaime is not a great shooter. I think he shot around 33% this year. We'll get into it. Slide to the baseline. Jaime can't push back Cade enough to end up scoring. He does a great job getting his own offensive rebound. He's just a high motor guy, offensive rebounder. All that stuff is awesome as well. It just kind of cherry on top when it comes to Jaime's game. But there are real creation issues, and he's going to get plucked, I believe, by Kawhi here. Yes, it's Kawhi, but Jaime can be pretty loose with the ball at times, especially when he's going to his scoring moves, and that's going to have to improve if he wants to continue to maintain usage and be a guy who really holds the ball and takes up a lot of possessions for Miami in the way that I do believe he can, given some of the skills he's shown. And again, we see an example of Jaime not being able to create much separation and relying on his touch and his spin move there. Clearly isn't a guy who has a lot of on-ball creation ability in terms of separating and space creating and bending the defense and generating advantages. I think that hurts his passing as well, because he can't force the defense into rotation as much as I wish he could, because he has such excellent vision. And Jaquez is like a solid shooter, like I said. I think he shot around 33% this year, but it was very inconsistent and on pretty low volume. He's confident enough to take some corner threes and pull up with the hand in his face, but it's very basic stuff. He's not really shooting off the dribble. He's not really shooting off of movement. It's mostly spot ups, open threes, capitalizing off of rotations and stuff. And as we've seen throughout this video, Jaquez doesn't really have the three-point volume to threaten defenses, but he is a very smart spacer, and I would love to see him get up more threes in the future. I think that's another development path where Jaime acting as the big here, setting a big wide screen, popping and lifting to this open space on the wing and rising up for a three over Batum at the end of the quarter. That's valuable stuff, and I just want to see more of it from Jaime. But then you see plays like this where the Sixers are treating him like a complete non-shooter. You can see Buddy Hield pointing, and Kelly Oubre just kind of sits in the paint here. They're not worried about Jaime shooting the ball, and Oubre ends up getting a rip. But if Jaime was more, like, I want Jaime shooting this ball. If I am the Heat, even if it's not like his most ideal thing, I think that's a critical development for him going forward. He has to be able to threaten defenses from out here with all of this space, and it's not something he's currently comfortable doing to the level you want your awesome off-ball wing to be doing. That lack of shooting kind of makes Jaime tweener-ish. He's a great cutter. He can space the floor that way. But as a guy who has some on-ball limitations but isn't an incredible floor spacer, it's certainly not perfect. There's room to grow. And the defensive end for him, I'd say, is maybe even better, honestly. He's an excellent defensive player, too, which a lot of these older guys are who come in. Jaime is just a very smart, well-positioned player. The motor and the instincts and the feel all come in on the defensive end, as he's primarily an off-ball defender and a really damn good one at that. Jaime is one of the better dig nail defenders in the league. I considered him for my defensive series. I don't think he's there yet, but as is Haywood Highsmith, who is sick. But we see Jaquez here pinching in at the nail, recovering out with some pretty solid speed and making a contest on the perimeter, and ends up getting Jeremy Grant to miss that shot. Just a very, very smart defender, and uses smarts and size and his timing and wingspan. Being tall and really smart and a good enough athlete gives you a pretty high floor on defense. Again, we see him digging at the nail, getting Paolo's handle and creating a turnover. Jaime is a great weak side tag defender as well. His responsibility to kind of guard 2v1 here. He reads Scoot Henderson lobbing to Ayton, and for a lot of players, this is a compromised position. He's behind Ayton, but Jaime is able to get up. We see the vertical athleticism here, the great timing, hand placement, and obviously Ayton's not a very physically imposing player, which is a sad thing to say given his stature. He's just not a very physical and powerful guy. But nonetheless, Jaime is able to make a big play there as an interior defender. The versatility Jaime gives you as a guy who can defend one pass away on the perimeter, a guy who can play on the interior, a guy who can X out right here. Really good job here rotating to the first pass. Gets a pretty decent closeout on Sam Hauser, who ends up missing the 3 there. I think Hauser was just like weirdly cold in that series as well, though. And then one more time, we're going to see Jaime doing his work at the nail. It is so valuable, especially in this NBA meta where defenses are pinching gaps really heavily and playing hard help one pass away, especially against players like Anthony Edwards, who aren't perfect when it comes to controlling handle and making decisions. Jaime can sit in this gap, force turnovers. And of course, Anthony Edwards is going to can that shot because it's Anthony Edwards. But Jaime, we've seen his ability to close out and recover. And that recovery part is also really important. And his active hands just create a lot of turnovers and create a lot of deflections. Again, we see him pinching in hard, and instead of kind of covering this cut like a more traditional defense, he's sitting at the nail, making the pass harder for Caruso, and ends up deflecting the ball, and the Heat end up turning him over. So Jaime is just a great off-ball defender. I don't know if he's ever going to be an elite special off-ball defender, but he's going to be a damn good one for a long time. On the ball is certainly where he struggles the most, as he just doesn't have the lateral quickness to routinely stop routinely stop smaller, quicker players, and gets opened up pretty easily by Sexton there. His hips are a bit stiff, and those flexibility issues we talked about on offense definitely show up on the defensive end, mostly as an on-ball guy. And Jaime's a great, tag defender, as we said. He's so smart when it comes to closing these gaps and taking away the high-value passing angles, but he's not the greatest recovery defender. His hips don't always open super fast. He's not the greatest at changing directions in space, and that can help him against quicker, more athletic closeout attackers, and even ones that aren't crazy quicker athletic. And here we see Jaime guarding Trey on the ball. This is just not an ideal role to me for Jaime. I don't think you want him guarding. I don't really know exactly what the matchups were on this possession. Maybe it was jumbled it was just jumbled in early offense, but Jaime's not a guy to me you want guarding guards. You don't want him guarding these elite pick and roll guys. He just doesn't have the foot speed or the quickness or the agility to maintain his defensive position on that end. And then even though Jaime is a really nice off-ball defender, there are moments where more explosive, stronger, taller players can just kind of outwork him, outmuscle him, and shoot over him. Even though Jaime is older and is pretty strong, I do think he can improve a lot in terms of functional strength against bigger, taller players, against other wing-sized guys. That's going to be another improvement point. And again, we see this kind of slower recovery here where Jaime gambles on a steal, or he just gambles here in terms of his positioning. Anthony Black gets him with the back door, and he's not quick enough to recover and almost gets that block. This is a nice example of Jaime is pretty slow, right, on the perimeter, changing directions, but he's very quick getting off of the floor, which is an interesting combination of athletic tools. Really quick and explosive vertically, but just not that same level of mover horizontally. Just not great at stopping guys who change directions on a dime. And like I said, I value off-ball defense a lot more than on-ball defense, so I still have a very positive outlook on Jaime's defense, and he is a pretty good wing defender, sticks with OG Anunoby, meets him at the summit, blocks that shot. The vertical explosion, and when he doesn't have to guard really quick players, when he can actually guard wing similar-sized players like OG, he can do a good job. I really do think so. And the Heat play a lot of zone defense, maybe more than any team in the league. I'd have to look that up, but I know they're always up there. Jaime is an excellent zone defender, too. Really good job here sinking down to cover the cut to Kyle Lowry. Hangs out of this area and ends up contesting the maxi pull-up. Just his smarts and positioning translate really well, in my opinion, to being a zone defender. And again, we're going to see him play against OG Anunoby. Really solid holding his position when players try to go through him, even if he's not the strongest guy in the whole world. Jaime is very smart and really good with positioning his body and his arms in ways that he gets in the way of defenders without fouling and without overreacting. So if you need him to guard even a player like Kelly Olynyk, I think he can do an okay job against. But we see some of the issues with change of direction. Kelly decelerates here, and Jaime just hops all the way back, jumps here, isn't able to recover. So there's a good amount of development that needs to happen on the ball. That's pretty normal for rookies to struggle there. And this is a pretty damn good possession against Shea. Even though Shea is able to get free and score, we see Jaime's ability to stop on a dime here, which we've noted his struggles to do, and then rise up really quickly to get a contest off. Most of the time, in this position, you are cooked against Shea. But because Jaime is tall, long, and springy, he can get up and offer a decent enough contest. So defensively, I think Jaime is going to be totally fine. I think he's going to be a very good defender for a long time. But offensively, I do think there are more questions in terms of where he levels out and how defenses are going to play him in year two. Like, now that they have a year of film on him, our defense is going to be even more willing to let Jaime shoot and to play off of him and to play the pass and things like that. So the main improvement areas to me for Jaime are that 3-point volume, getting those shots up for sure, and then is just any possible athletic improvements will be really nice. But Jaime is going to be a damn good player for a long time, even if, he is closer to his ceiling than some other rookies in this class. I would bet on that being the case, but that's still a really good player. I could see Jaime being a useful, fourth, fifth starter on a championship level team for a long time. And for a guy who drafted in the 20s, that is absolutely, or just around 20 or whatever it was, 18 maybe, that is absolutely incredible. What a find by Miami. And I really do love Jaime. I apologize for being so wrong about that Heat pick. He's my boy, my SoCal UCLA guy, and I really, really hope he continues to succeed and prove all of my doubts wrong and continues to develop into the star that he maybe is destined to become. So let me know what you think about Jaime.